This is a WKYT podcast.
It is Friday afternoon, and it is cold outside. Going to get a lot colder later on tonight. You are warm inside, hopefully, wherever you are for Facebook Live Friday. I'm Brian Milam. That is Lee K. Howard III. And we have a lot of stuff to go over with you. UK basketball, UK football, high school football, and even a little incident that happened last night between the Browns and the Steelers, if we want to discuss that too. That was not pretty. So if you have questions or comments, give us a ring on the Facebook Live, and we will say hello and see if we can answer any of your questions. We've got football. Let's start with football at the moment, because UK football takes on Vandy tomorrow, and 3 games to go. You've got to win 2 to be bowl eligible. And if you were to fall to Vandy, there's a lot of pressure in those last 2 games. Yeah, really. I mean, this win, we like to talk about games being must-win games, and I know that's a phrase that gets thrown out there a lot, whether that's the case or not. I think this game against Vandy in many ways is a must-win game. Now, they could lose the game and still make a bowl game by beating Martin and Louisville, but you don't want to go into the last 2 games with that pressure and with that sort of, you lose all momentum if you lose to Vanderbilt, Vanderbilt, and especially when you've won 3 straight in that series. So in my opinion, Brian, that is a must-win game for the Wildcats. They've got to go down there to Nashville and get a win over a team that's won 2 games. A win, we've seen good Vanderbilt teams back in the past when James Franklin had them rolling. This is a team that Kentucky should beat, and I certainly think that they can tomorrow. This is a team, Vandy, which lost to UNLV by 3+4 touchdowns. This is a program that, you talk about, well, we're just playing for pride. Yeah, they have pride in their school, they have pride in themselves, pride in their teammates, but this is a team that has 0 momentum. They have nothing going right for them. This team is ripe for the picking, and Kentucky has got to pick wisely. They've got to go into Nashville and win, and this is a series that up until the last couple of years, it was 44-2. I believe just like 3 years ago. Kentucky's won the last several meetings. But Kentucky's got to stop the run. They've got to close out a game. You've had a chance to close out Florida, didn't do it. Chance to close out Tennessee, didn't do it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about Vandy being a potentially must-win game. We'd be talking about, hey, they need this win to enhance their bowl prospects. Right. And at this point, there's still an opportunity for Kentucky to win 8 games with a bowl win. Exactly right. So this season can still be a very good season, if not great season by Kentucky football standards. And it was always looked to be it was going to be a little bit of a drop-off from last year, just because of the amount of talent that you knew that you were losing to the NFL. If you followed up a 10-win season with an 8-win season, especially when you lose 2 quarterbacks, I think people could look back at it at the end of the year and go, hey, you know what? They made it work. And it worked. And then the recruiting class that's coming in. But back to Kentucky and Vanderbilt. I think the other reason why you've got to beat Vanderbilt is for years, and let's be honest, and some Kentucky fans aren't going to want to hear this, but for years it was Kentucky and Vanderbilt as the bottom feeders in the SEC. And it was, whoever won that game wasn't last. Well, Kentucky has elevated its program to a level at this moment much higher than Vandy. They're at least middle of the pack in the SEC. I'm talking about Kentucky. In order to stay there, at least in not Kentucky football fans' minds, but in the rest of the country's minds, Kentucky's got to beat Vanderbilt. You can't lose to Vanderbilt. Otherwise, so many people on the outside will still see the Wildcats and the Commodores as about the same, even though that's not the case. No question about that. 3:30 Eastern kickoff from Vandy. And as Lee K and I mentioned, you'd think it's a must-win ball game, especially with Martin and Louisville on the way. Now, before we talk about any other football topics, let's jump back to basketball for a minute, because UK and Evansville, I asked some of the folks at the end of the bench, of Evansville's bench, I said, all right, with 20 seconds to go, and you could tell something was, they were going to win it possibly. I said, okay, who saw this coming? And don't say you did. They said one guy. Walter McCarty saw this coming. Now, obviously, it's easy to say when you're up by 4 with 20 seconds to go, but after the first half, the media room is 10 feet from the visitors' locker room, and the only thing that separates the media from the locker room is a thin blue curtain. And as soon as Evansville, and I followed them into the media room so I could set up a couple of things, Walter McCarty screams at the top of his lungs, "We can win. We can win." And I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about it because you felt it.
Yeah.
They had a look in their eyes. And Therese Maxey said after the game, he said, they had a look in their eyes we didn't have. Michigan State didn't have it. EKU didn't have it. Other teams, he said, I don't think I've ever seen like that before. And someone mentioned, I just watched the version of Purple Hoosiers because the Purple Aces won. They did what no one thought possible. And now you kind of gut check time a little bit for UK because you're a 25-point favorite. You lose. Now, maybe you're obviously you're not going to be the number one team in the country next week, but now what do you do?
Well, I think you can look at it one of two ways. Of course, there's always the negative, and the negative is certainly you were the number one team in the country for about 48 hours, if not 24 hours,
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're knocked off that pedestal and maybe back to some reality, some gut check time. And yeah, it would have been fun for them to be the number one team in the country and roll through some of these teams. But the positive side of it is, you know, there are those fans that always like to see them get an early loss to be kind of a wake-up call and a reality check of, hey, we've got things to work on. And I think John Calipari now has the tape to say, okay, you're not as good as you might have thought you were.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I will say this. The fact that Walter McCarty was the head coach of the team that won makes it a little bit easier for Kentucky fans.
Not as much salt.
Not as much salt, because at least you can go, okay, well, good for Walter in his coaching career.
Right.
But, yeah, very embarrassing, disappointing loss.
Yeah.
Certainly not one that you expected the Wildcats to suffer this early in the season.
Now, for the UK fans who are upset, and yeah, I get it, you have 6 days in between games, so you really get to stew on it and think about it. And as I also mentioned to Tyrese Maxey, I said, you know, you're young, you've seen March Madness, you've seen upsets in March when, you know, somebody like UMBC beats Virginia. That had never happened before. We've all seen Duke lose as a 1 or a 2 seed. Would you rather lose now or lose later?
Right.
Because it's a lot more embarrassing in March than it is in November if you lose to a team like Evansville. And if you're a 1 seed or a 2 seed, whatever UK might get, you're going to play a team like Evansville. And that's why everybody gets so nervous when March rolls around.
Right, and to that point, I mean, not that you want to lose any games,
Sure.
but sometimes it's certainly better to lose them early than late. I think back to that 2015 season, the 38-1 season, when they were winning game after game after game. And they weren't blowing everybody out. I mean, they had some blowouts certainly in that season, but you got to remember some of those games. I can recall I went to the game down in Athens, Georgia that year, and it was tight. It was close, and they almost lost a couple of games. It was so close, but the fact that they hadn't lost any games all year, I can just remember just how nervous people would get each and every time they stepped on the floor. Even if it was just an SEC game at the time that, you know, they were still going to win the SEC, but people just wanted to keep that streak alive. And then we all know how that story ends. It eventually caught up with them in the Final Four.
Right.
Now, I don't know if them losing a game earlier in the year would have helped them out in the Wisconsin game or not. But sometimes, to your point, Brian, it's better to just get a clunker out of the way.
Yeah.
And then learn from it and grow from it and be a better team.
Well, let's talk about the biggest clunker in the nation right now, and that's the Browns and Steelers fiasco last night. We have seen brawls. We've seen things that have happened. We've seen people get hit in the head with foreign objects. It was almost like wrestling last night.
Yeah.
And
except for it was real.
Except this one is real. and a player, another player with a helmet.
Yeah, and I laugh, and I'm not making light of this at all. I mean, that was one of the scarier things I've ever seen. I mean, I think back to the Malice in the Palace, and when Ron Artest and the Pacers and Ron Artest at the time and the Pistons went back and forth, but nobody was swinging an object like a helmet. Now, Myles Garrett has, you know, I think he's been suspended indefinitely, at least through the end of this year. I think they're going to make an example out of this.
You have to.
Now, he wasn't the only one in the fight. I mean, there were other guys, and you know, he may not have even been the instigator, but he took it to the next level.
Sure.
And that's what they're going to make. You know, it wasn't him just picking on Mason Rudolph.
Right.
Mason Rudolph certainly had something to do with instigating Myles Garrett, but still, you can't. That's inexcusable. You cannot do that.
Yeah, and I'm glad the NFL has said you're gone, and we'll let you know when you can come back.
Yeah, don't call us, we'll call you.
Exactly. The check will not be in the mail. But yeah, somebody has got to. there's way too much violence in a lot of situations, but that is unnecessary violence. That is the kind of violence that's not game related. That was almost, I know Rudolph pulled off his helmet a little bit, and that is the way to end careers right there.
And especially in a league that is trying to really emphasize player safety. I mean, they're
exactly.
trying to move back toward, they don't want you hitting helmet to helmet when both of you have a helmet. They certainly don't want helmet to no helmet. I mean, that would certainly be, so that's one of those things they're going to make an example. And I've heard this several times on radio, national radio broadcasts and TV programs. They've made this point, but can you imagine, nothing against Mason Randolph rather, but can you imagine if that was Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or one of the marquee faces of the league?
Sure.
I mean, that would have, not that it would have necessarily been worse for the particular player, but the image of things of the NFL, that's what's at stake right now, and they've got to clean that up.
I just want to quote Sam Weish, "You're in Cincinnati, not Cleveland." Just what Chris Bailey's, Bengals guy over here. Last thing, real quick, let's talk high school football. Tonight, the district championships will be decided. The regular season was about seeding for the first 2 rounds of the postseason. And tonight, we have got some Donnybrooks. And all of them, I believe, are rematches. Central against Franklin County. Franklin County wins it on a Hail Mary at the half, which was great. We've got Scott County and Douglas, which was a beatdown in the regular season.
Have they ever played each other in the past? I can't think if they have any sort of history.
Well, I know
anything.
who the kings of the 859 are. I know who the kings of the 502 are.
And I know who the team up north is.
See? All you need to know right there. They don't like one another.
No, they don't.
That's going to get interesting. Somerset and LCA. LCA beat Somerset by 1 a few weeks ago. Clark County, Oldham County. Clark wins by 2 3 weeks ago. We have got Boyle Catholic. I mean, that's a 20-year rivalry. Yeah. That's awesome.
And then in town, you got Tates Creek Dunbar.
And now you've got city champs.
Yeah, Who's going to be city champs? So no, you got Tates Creek Dunbar. That's a good one as well.
I mean, we've got so much football, and it's going to be a little chilly. But one thing I love about playoff football, especially right now, yes, you're going to crown a champion. Now you're going to go into the region final. But we get to stay at a game a lot longer and see how these things materialize. And I really think we're going to have some more down-to-the-wire thrillers tonight. Which one are you going to? You're going to the Douglas.
Well, I'm going to 2. I'm going to go to 2. I'm going to stay in the city and go to Tates Creek Dunbar and then go over to the Douglas-Scott County game. So,
and I've got Madison Southern at East Jessamine. Power football. Mike Boland. What's the over-under on throwing the football tonight? That'd be a great betting line if there was betting in high school sports, and we know there's not. But if Mike Boland...
2.5.
2.5?
Yeah.
So it's like the half a lateral that could go either way?
Yeah, I mean, you just can't say 2 because you got to have like and I would take the under.
Tasha's going to have the stats going. Yeah, we got to go 5 wide here, Coach. That's his wife, by the way.
So take us through, Brian, all the scenarios. Just take us all the way to the championship. Who wins?
The better team is going to win every game. The team that scores the most points will win.
And join us at 11 o'clock tonight for all those highlights.
We will have all of the highlights on Game Time tonight. Lee K and I will break it down and tell you what's next, because this is also, after tonight, it's RPI time for the KHSAA. We'll talk about that possibly tonight and certainly next week. For Lee K. Howard, I'm Brian Milam. Thanks for watching Facebook Live, and we'll see you later on tonight.